Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto's presentation of the pros and cons of the three measures appearing on the Palo Alto ballot for the California primary election, which is on June 7th. The League was formed in 1920 after women received the right to vote. At that time, League women realized they were unfamiliar with current issues and decided to learn about them. After educating themselves, they wanted to share what they learned with the community, as we are doing today. The League is a nonpartisan organization. This means the League never supports or opposes candidates or political parties, nor do we deliberately shape our education or advocacy on issues to benefit a political party. The League of Women Voters has two distinct roles: voter service and advocacy. In our voter service role, we present impartial, nonpartisan information. This is what we're doing today. We will give you the facts about the ballot measures and arguments that the proponents and the opponents are making. We will not judge the merits of the arguments or guarantee their validity. Today's presentation will provide background on one state measure, one Bay Area regional measure, and one county measure. Also, we'll present some information on the voting process in California and describe the election of delegates to national party conventions. Let's get started. California Proposition 50 regarding the suspension of legislators is a constitutional amendment. The California state constitution allows, by a 2/3 vote, each house of the legislature to expel members, that is, ending his or her term of office. This is rare, and it was last done in 1905. The legislature may also suspend its members, which means they may not perform any official actions of the office, such as voting, but the office is held open. Currently, a suspended member continues to receive pay and benefits until she leaves or he leaves the office or resigns. 2 years ago, 3 senators were suspended when accused of felonies. This led to Proposition 50 proposal. Currently, suspension of a member of the Assembly or the Senate requires a majority vote. Proposition 50 amends the state constitution by requiring a higher vote threshold, a 2/3 vote to suspend a member. And it provides one option to either retain or stop pay and benefits of the member. Reasons given for the suspension and a suspension end date must be set. Overall, expulsion and suspension is rare, and the cost savings are insignificant given the state's very large budget. Supporters of the measure say Proposition 50 is needed to restore public trust after much public frustration that the senators' hands were tied in 2014. It will provide a way to cut off pay and benefits in the most egregious cases, and by requiring a large majority to support any suspension or expelling action, bipartisan support for the action is likely. Proposition 50 is supported by California Forward, whose website is listed on your screen. Opponents of the measure say expulsion is better than suspension. If a member is suspended, his or her constituents no longer have representation in Sacramento. Further, if a minority member supports unpopular positions, the legislative body could quiet him or her through suspension. If this measure does not pass, legislators may still be expelled or expended, and in the case of being suspended, with benefits and salaries intact. Vote no on Proposition 50 are the opponents listed on your screen. The next measure, Measure AA, has a long name. It's called the San Francisco Bay Clean Water Pollution Prevention and Habitat Restoration Expenditure Program. It's known popularly as the Clean and Healthy Bay Measure. This measure was placed on the ballot by the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, authorized by state law in 2008. It is a regional agency charged with raising and allocating resources for restoration, enhancement, protection, and enjoyment of the wetlands and habitat in the San Francisco Bay and along its shoreline. For the last decade, concerned scientists, environmentalists, business leaders, and local officials have been working to develop a regional funding measure to enable wetland restoration necessary for a long-term clean and healthy bay before sea level rise forecloses the opportunity. This measure is a culmination of many efforts to address funding requirements. The San Francisco Bay is the largest estuary on the West Coast. Over the last century, landfill and toxic pollution has had a massive impact with the population growth. New land was created by filling in about 1/3 of the bay, and garbage sites were located on the bay, and waste and pollution were dumped into it. Over time, the wetlands, which provide natural flood protection, have been compromised, while regulation and volunteer programs, such as teams pulling invasive plants from the shorelines, have had beneficial effects. However, significant funds are needed to improve the overall bay environment. The San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority is not a regulatory authority and does not duplicate the missions of other public and private organizations, such as the Association of Bay Area Governments. 7 members, all elected officials, represent all areas of the Bay, that is, north, east, south, and west. The agency has over 30 advisory members representing a huge range of interests: scientists, environmental groups, water districts, labor councils, etc. I'm going to stop and take a drink of water. This measure proposes to assess a $12 annual parcel tax for 20 years in the 9-county Bay Area to generate $500 million for Bay projects. Projects will be prioritized based on the positive impact on the Bay as a whole and for the long term, with provisions that funded projects take place in all 9 counties. The measure has 4 programs for which funds will be used: safe, clean water and pollution prevention, vital fish, bird, and wildlife habitats, integrated flood protection, and shoreline public access. 2/3 voting in favor of the measure is required to pass, and this is calculated on a Bay Area-wide total vote, not county by county. Thus, a large majority in one area of the Bay Area could offset a lower margin in another area. No more than 5% of the funds will be used for administrative purposes, and half of the funds available for projects would be allocated geographically in proportion to populations in the North, East, South, and West Bay. And the remaining 50% of the funds generated by this parcel tax would be without regard to county. Supporters say that the measure will protect the community from floods, improve water quality, and reduce trash, pollution, and toxins in the Bay, and improve wildlife habitat. And it will enhance general public access to the Bay's shorelines. They also say that the measure is accountable to the public and transparent in operations through its fiscal constraints. Only 5% may be spent on administration, for example. And there will be an independent citizens oversight committee and annual reports. The measure also provides seed money to attract additional matching state, federal, and private sector funds, spreading tax monies further and for which funds are not currently available. In all, the supporters say the $12 parcel tax is a small price to pay for the bay. Listed on your screen is the website of the Save the Bay Action Fund. It lists hundreds of supporters of this measure, including businesses, community and civic, environmental, and labor organizations, as well as individuals, politicians, and local governments. Opponents of the measure say it will transfer money to a special interest agency that most people have never heard of, and will require a new, expensive bureaucracy to oversee expenditures. They also say, excuse me, it is a regressive tax because corporations and wealthy owners of large properties pay the same amount as lower income homeowners with smaller properties. In addition, they believe it is unfair to those closer to the bay because they will benefit more than those further away. For example, residents of Gilroy and Half Moon Bay are much further away than residents of Palo Alto. It would be better, they say, if structured as a benefit assessment district. Listed on your screen are two organizations, the Contra Costa County Taxpayer Association and the Silicon Valley Taxpayers Association, who oppose this measure. You will find additional information in your Santa Clara County sample ballot. Measure A, renewal of the Santa Clara County Park Charter Fund. The Santa Clara County Park and Recreation Department maintains and operates 29 regional parks with more than 50 acres of land throughout the county, 10,000 of which are not available to the general public for lack of funds to develop them. Rancho San Antonio, which is off 280, and the Upper Stevens Creek parks off Skyline are two nearby parks. Santa Clara County is a charter county, and its general fund is supported by property taxes. Since 1972, a fixed portion of this tax revenue has been dedicated to funding of county parks, allocated by a formula. 15% of the funds for purchase of new lands, 5% for development of that land, and 80% for operations and maintenance. The set-aside is now 1.425 cents per assessed $100 of assessed value. Since the early days, the formula has been weighted somewhat toward park purchases rather than development of the new spaces. Measure A is not a new tax. It comes to the voters to reallocate property tax funds so more money may be directed to capital improvements such as restrooms, trails, roads, etc., and less to new acquisitions. Simply, it is a direction on how your tax money should be spent. It proposes a decrease of 5% from 15% to 10% for parkland purchases and an increase of 5% from 5% to 10% for improvements once purchased at a slightly different rate of 1.5 cents per $100 of assessed property tax. The operations and maintenance allocation remains the same at 80%. This formula, if passed, would expire in 2032. Because this is neither a new tax nor an increase in taxes, it requires only a majority vote to pass. Supporters of Measure A say it will not increase your taxes, and it will maintain stable funding for 15 more years and restore a fractional rate reduction made in 2006, namely the fact that the 1.42 cents rate will return to 1.5 cents rate. They also say it will reallocate available funds for badly needed capital improvements of newly acquired parks, such as adding and updating restrooms, roads, trails, and the like. Supporters on Parks include Yes on Parks, and the website address is on your screen. This organization is composed of individuals and community organizations supporting the measure. Opponents say Measure A will tie the hands of government officials based on current priorities and overall efficiencies. They also say it commits a portion of the general fund to a particular use. The only known opponent is listed in the ballot measure booklet that you have as W. Dito, who lives in Milpitas. So just a few reminders about the June 7th, 2016 California primary election. In the California primary, everyone votes for all U.S. and state office candidates, regardless of their party affiliation. This year, the offices we all will vote on are U.S. Senator, United States Representative, State Senator, Assembly Member. The top two candidates will be in a runoff race in November. If one candidate, however, gets a majority of votes, she or he is not elected in the primary, but will face the candidate with the next highest number of votes in November. There are always two candidates for the positions that I just mentioned. Local elections, such as the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisor position, which is on the spring ballot, and the nomination of the president, do not follow this procedure. As for voting for presidential candidates, voters who are members of a party may only vote for candidates in his or her party. That is, Republicans vote for Republican candidates. Voters who are not members of a party, officially designated as declined to state party, cannot vote for a presidential candidate unless one asks for a ballot for one of the three parties that allow non-members to vote. These are the American Independent, the Democratic, and the Libertarian parties. Other parties require membership to vote. We have learned that many Californians unknowingly registered as members of the American Independent Party, a far-right-leaning party, thinking that is the same as being a so-called independent, that is, a voter with no party affiliation. If you wish to change your party or your address or your name on the voter rolls, the deadline is May 23rd. In regard to the presidential races, there is no direct vote to nominate a president for a particular, by a particular party. Each party has its own processes, which vary by state and by party. Delegates to the national party conventions are typically selected at party caucuses, and which delegates actually go to the convention depend on voting for the particular parties. So very simply, for the Democratic Party, delegates are allocated in each congressional district in proportion to the actual vote the candidate gets. For the Republican Party, again simply, the statewide winner gets 10 votes, and the state party official 3 votes, and 3 votes are allocated to the winner in each of the 53 congressional districts. Listed on your screen are the websites with everything you might want to know about the measures, the candidates, donors to campaigns, voting requirements, and getting a ballot, and more. These include the League of Women Voters of California, the Easy Voter Guide, which is especially valuable for new citizens, the Voter's Edge, a nonpartisan website with loads of information, the Legislative Analyst's Office, the Secretary of State, whose office handles statewide voting procedures, California Votes, information from the education, which is information from the Education Fund side of the League of Women Voters of California. And finally, the Santa Clara County Register of Voters. Many of these publications and websites are listed in 3 publications. The Voter's Guide, which is put out by the League of Women Voters and which you can get at any of your public libraries in Palo Alto and many other places. You'll also find additional information about the primary election in great detail in your sample ballot, which describes all the measures in Santa Clara County and the Bay Area Regional one, and the California presidential primary material that is sent by the state of California. All of these publications have a great deal of information. You're getting started today, and thank you very much for getting to the end of this presentation, and happy voting. Goodbye.